Hello, and welcome to Leaders and Their Stories, turning experience into influencers. In this podcast, top technical leaders will share their journeys, insights, and game-changing lessons. Each episode explores challenges, innovations, and leadership moments that shape their careers and equips you with strategies to elevate your influence. And tonight, we're here with Joseph Rockey Jr. He's going to talk about how to get people to want to tell you the truth. And believe me, that can be hard, and Joe's going to give you some ways to get around that. Joe, take it away.
Yeah, so the reason it's hard literally goes back to your reptilian brain, to your brain stem. Because if you think about this from your own perspective, which is really true for everyone else, is that you probably have at most 7 people you will share anything with without any type of thought or hesitation. Society calls those best friends.
1 for me.
1. Okay, we'll see, hence the at most. So the reality is that every other person in the world, you were putting a filter through to keep them from coming in to basically use you. That is the primary reason. It's a survival instinct we all have. We're not going to let someone in to hurt us. And hurt us is a very broad thing when our subconscious is concerned. So what we all have is a natural pushing away barrier process. Some of the easiest signs to think about this is go onto any dating site and see how people push away, or anyone going through that. It's very common.
I think the dating site analogy is very apt in this case. I'm sure most of our listeners have at least tried it or viewed it at some point, and you run into exactly this phenomenon.
Yeah, it's because it's human nature. We're all built to give people a process that we have to go through and push them away. And when you actually dive into the science of what's going on here, it all comes back to the traumas in which we received in our life, whether they be major or massive. To yourself, they are always massive. Trauma is one of these things that is not relatively shared. Not like when you look at the car crash versus the car crash in Manhattan versus, those can be relatively compared statistically. Internally, your trauma is your trauma, and that is what it is.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I've had people who've experienced extreme trauma, and I'm looking at it like, why is that traumatic? I don't really get it, but they're going through hell. And
you've actually nailed upon part of the major reason why, is that while there are many, it's a spectrum. So there's many different ways you go through the recovery of trauma. Basically, from the outside people coming at you, there's 3 major categories. There is people blamed you for whatever problem you caused. People tried to instantly fix the problem for you, or people ignored you because of the problem.
Of course, we're ignoring trauma like people in combat and things like that in this case.
Well, there's all types of trauma. I mean, the type of trauma that we're talking about, the way in which people try to help it with you, starting when you were very young through any major event, though, has one of those types of things. Now, like I said, it's a spectrum. So there's different ways in which people can help you, or respond to you is the more appropriate word. And as a result, each person has a different preference for both what they don't want in terms of response coming to them and what they do want. Said another way, there is no universality of it.
And I'll give you an example. When I, in my previous jobs, or anything rather, I do not like receiving criticism directed at me. Mm-hmm. Now, criticism about something I've written or about something I've made, that's different because that's not me. But if you start criticizing me, and I think a lot of people have that thing, I'm going to react, and probably not the way you want me to.
And you nailed it on the head. And there's some players right now in any professional sport, if you scream at them directly, they'll go out and they'll bury the 3-pointer right before halftime. So it's a different personality type. And like I said, it's a preference thing. So as a result, we all know those things that we either hate or love about that process. And since this is a subconscious process that happens, it doesn't go through the logical sectors of your brain, which means when you see it in someone else, you just get that feeling of, oh, I don't want to deal with them. I don't want that. Your guard extra comes up. And you can't really describe why, but you have that feeling. I just know we shouldn't be around that person. And the reason you get that is because regardless of what your own personal traumas were, you have emotional scars all over you. And what other people, because everyone can do this, is they can pick up cues as far as what are the emotional scars you're coming. So what people are instinctually doing when they're having an interaction with you is, whether they realize it or not, they are looking for, do you have my triggers and red flags that I want to avoid?
Right.
So
Right.
the easiest way to get people to want to tell you the truth is to not get in their repulsion process. Because as soon as you start kicking someone out of your life mentally, they're gone. And it's hell and a half to fight back through that. But if you just don't get put into that current that's going to take you out to sea, just by bypassing that, you can enter into someone's space of how to become, well, I'm not saying a reason to push you away, so I will start to open up to you. And that's a process to go through. How do you remove your own scars? But that's one of the things I teach people.
Well, and I see you have the book Casino Sales Master behind you. Did you go over these concepts in your book?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the core of why it works. I mean, if you think about it, there's not a whole lot that every culture in this world agrees upon. But they do agree that casinos are built to take your money. That's why they exist.
Pretty obvious.
Yeah. So if you can go into a place that is literally rigged against you, they have made a mathematical advantage, and you can get those people to want to see you succeed, aka pay you for being there, that's a completely different world of relationship and sales. And then you're right, that's exactly what's in the book. So while I'm able to introduce the concept here, the exercise regimen in which you need to go through to remove the scars from you, that's, like I said, a big part of what the book is.
Nice. Now, you went through all the trouble of writing a book. I'm sure that was a laborious process. It took a while, and books always do.
Yeah, say the least.
But you had a reason for doing it. And what was that? You wanted to brand yourself and make yourself known better in your community for your business or whatever?
Well, that was certainly part of it. A bigger part of it is that I knew I had this superpower that is really not out there in the sales world. You know, any of the major sales companies out there you can think of, just to name a couple, Ziegler, Dale Carnegie, Sandler, they all will teach you the structure of how to do a sale. They use different terminology, but they all basically teach you the same playlist of how to do it.
Right.
And while there is no universal sales script, because there's no universal relationship script, they have that part down. This is the skeleton. Like, if you want to go from New York to Miami, you got to drive south. Like, as far as a basic starting point. Now, there's more efficient ways and less efficient ways, etc. But what the sales systems did not have is they did not have that answer of how can I get someone to want to see me succeed? And the reason for that is this science I'm laying out for you, less than 2% of the people actually know it, let alone are able to teach it. So that's why we go out of our way. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I do fundamentally believe and know in my soul that sales will heal the world. That's the fundamental interaction that will fix everything. So it's only if you sell correctly, though, and you're not like the used car salesman that's just using people to get their commission, which, by the way, is the entire. I used the dating analogy earlier about why you repel people. That might be the only stronger revulsion people have other than salespeople. And since I'm not making a book about serial dating, because that's not my world, I went with sales.
Well, that makes sense. And that makes sense. And I'm sure that book has helped you. And if you didn't have a book versus now that you have a book, I'm sure you see the difference. Because I'm in networking groups with you and things, and I actually see you reference it occasionally, bring it up, and a book lets you do that.
But yeah, it's one of these things, like literally it's over my shoulder right now because of the backdrop I built. But it's one of those things that, for me at least, obviously it's a conversation starter. I wrote the title to be Casino Master for that purpose, to be a conversation starter. But it also it's a staple of knowledge and proof. Because how else can you show how good you are at something and have it be relatable to someone else? You know, when you show that you're an international bestseller, that's an accomplishment, that's a feat, that's something hard. And in most cases, it's something most people have never tried. So therefore, you're automatically in rarefied air. Just like if you run a marathon, most people will never try to do that. Wow, that's like super successful.
I
So
think
that's one of the main reasons I did that as well, from the selfish standpoint of what was I going to get out of it.
And I think that the international bestseller part is a good part, but that's not really necessary for most books. You don't need to be a bestseller to use a book for, a lot of my clients use them for speaking engagements and things.
To that point, you're exactly right. I hire people for my own speaking engagements. I don't care if they're a bestseller or not. I care that they have proof and evidence that they're not basically just only have an hour worth of content and they can fly in, do their spiel, and fly out. The book shows that.
And that's a key point. The book proves, to a certain extent, as much as you can in a book, that this person has the expertise, the credibility, the stories, the experience, whatever, to do what you need done.
Yeah. And, for my own speaking career, before I started launching my own events, that was certainly something I was running into was, well, how can you show us that you've done this? Well, I have a laundry list of client testimonies and all that. Well, that's cool and great, but where's the book that actually shows it, that we actually could follow along with? And I was constantly getting that pushback. And again, it's one of the reasons I wrote it. There was, again, a laundry list of things that having the book has helped with. The one thing I do have to say that I was misled with from my publisher at the time, which I don't think would have stopped me from doing it, knowing what I got now, but the book in and of itself is a proxy to revenue. It in and of itself is not a true massive revenue generator.
That's what I tell all my clients. You're not going to make money directly from the book. You're going to make money by using the book.
Exactly.
You have to use it. It's like a hammer. It's not going to do any good sitting in a drawer.
Yeah, and admittedly, it took me a minute or two to realize how you use this tool.
Of course.
And I wish I would have had someone to be able to teach me it earlier in life without wasting a year or so with it. But now that I got it a little bit, it is massively powerful.
And that's the first thing we start off with the client is, what are you going to use this for? And we get there. But to change the subject slightly, you've talked a lot about the psychology of this sales technique and so forth, and why these various things happen. How could, say, a cybersecurity person who's, say, a mid-level executive use these techniques to get ahead in their careers?
Well, sure. So one of the big parts that you'll see, especially explicitly in what I teach, is you need to be able to get to two things. From an intellectual standpoint, you need to get to, how is this a win-win for everyone? So if I'm going to present a proposal to you, what is the win-win that you guys get out of it? And very clearly, what's the win I get out of it? Because so many deals die if you only focus on one side or the other. So if you're only focusing on what the prospect's going to get, but it's very unclear what the salesperson gets,
right?
There's suspicion that comes up. It's like, why are you doing this again? Like all those red flags about, am I about to be used? Is this fake? Comes up. And likewise, if it's only about what you as the salesperson is going to get out of this, the ball never starts moving. So The intellectual part one is make it a win-win. And what you need to do, which is the harder part, is how do you get to what the true problem is in that other side's party? Because one of the lies that we learned over the last 20 years of sales that has become ubiquitous throughout sales is that features and benefits move products. And the reason that lie exists is because Amazon and eBay sold on features and benefits. That's how they started. It's how they continue to do it. But the reality is that was only because people were trying to run away from used car salesmen. It's not because that's how people buy. They were avoiding a negative. When people buy, they want someone who can get in, they can be open with and tell the true reason that they want to make this purchase and have that intellectual conversation. They might not ever consciously know that's the reason, but that is the truth. So how you get to talk to someone and get that inner soul about why it's personally relevant to that person across from you. So if you're as a mid-level manager trying to get up two ladders and you've got to go through an intermediary, say you got to go through your regional VP before you get to the CEO, you have to be able to get to that regional VP why it matters to them that they are going to let this conversation happen. And that is an incredibly deep relationship skill that you have to do that, again, training, we can teach you to do it like butter, but for most people, it's unnatural how do I go in a work setting that is going out of its way to avoid personal conversations to find out why you personally would care about me making this proposal? And that's true for any B2B sale, but especially for the internal politics.
Well, let's say you're a cybersecurity person and you're trying to sell something that'll prevent breaches, like people getting credit card data. So you go to your boss and you say, we need to spend $5 million on this product to help do that. And you start listing all the benefits and features and things. Your boss rolls his eyes and says no, because you haven't found out what's important to the business. And that's obviously going to be what's important to the boss, hopefully, if he's a good boss. So what you need to do, what I'm hearing is you need to find out what's important to your boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that assumption is wrong a lot. The real reason that people move forward, sure, the business is part of it. But for that boss's standpoint, it could be that this is not a relevant problem on his to-do list, but going through and trying to get the funding for $5 million would be a giant problem for him. So why not going to do it? Just a complete non-starter. But if you can get it to find out what's going on with them, the deep downs of, realistically, what happens to you if this whole thing, if we lose all of our credit card data, what happens to you? And quite frankly, if you don't get a real relevant answer there, the guy will never do it. But if you can get to, well, this is what happens to me, well, professionally, I probably never get promoted again. Well, what does that mean for the rest of your life? Does that, you can go all the way down the road of, does that mean you don't live in the city you want, in the house you want, etc.? The point is you're building a personal relationship and connecting with them. That might mean at the end of the day, you're not able to put your kids into the school you want to put them to, or whatever the case might be. We're not talking about the security sale anymore. We're talking about why in his soul, he can't let this problem exist. And that's the process you go through when you're getting into the actual ocean of emotions of the person who's making the purchase.
Now, sometimes that's complicated because you're talking to your boss, but you're actually selling to his boss's boss's boss.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand the whole chain, I would imagine.
Yeah, and you don't need to know the answer at the end. You need to know for the step you're at. And again, this is applicable to business or internal. You might not be entering in another business you're trying to sell to with the true decision maker. They probably have a gatekeeper built on before it, maybe several layers, but it's all about why should this person care and give you the time of day rather than just putting it into the funnel that is the just submit it online, someone will get back to you approach, which so many people accept as the business to business solution. Like even today on my LinkedIn, I saw 3 different people trying to sell how to write a better business proposal. Yeah. That is not how you win this game. You win the game by not having to do the proposal and talking to the person about what actually matters to them. It's a completely different way of doing it. And this is why my system works. One of many examples.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Well, we've learned a lot today from the psychology of how to actually make the sale, whether the sale is selling your boss on funding your project, or whether the sale is selling a product like a car, or whether, interesting enough, you're in the dating circuit.
It also applies to getting your 13-year-old to actually tell you where they're going at night, to getting your 3-year-old to want to brush his teeth. These are relationship skills that transfer in every part of your world and enhances everything. Again, I bring up sales because people like revenue, but every single form of your relationships will improve once you adopt it.
And the thing I find most interesting is you wrote it up in a book that you're now selling to people to help them out, which also helps you build your business bigger. Because like I said earlier, I know in networking events and other places where I've seen you're using that book as a tool, and you've probably made back dozens of times more than you spent on it indirectly. And that's very important to understand, is your book is a tool. It's a marketing tool. First of all, it's got a lot of content that you can then split up and use all over the place. My clients have gotten TED Talks, speeches, speaking engagements, all kinds of things from their book. And most of them are real pleased with when they use it, they're very pleased with the results and they recognize it. This is fascinating. Any concluding words? Is there one thing that you would like to tell our listeners that they go away with?
You already have the ability to fix all the things I talked about psychologically today. And fix might not even be the right word. How to build upon them and how to use your own psychology for you. You just need to practice and train at it. And like I said, it's one thing that just like any other practice, you focus on specific elements. So like when a football team does practice, they focus on how to hand the ball off, how to catch the ball. It's not necessarily running the complete game every time, but it's doing the practice and the drills. And guess what? They get better as a result. The same thing is true with this. Most of us, you, have never learned how to do a relationship correctly before from a scientific level. Going through the training and exercises radically changes that world. You can do it on a self-guided tour. That's what the book was built for. It's Casino Sales Master. Or we can do it together in our coaching course, which is at casinosalesmaster.win.
Well, you just answered my next question, how to get hold of you, and I'm sure you just go to that site and it's all there. Well, thank you for appearing on this podcast. Appreciate it. This has been Richard Lowe. I am the Writing King and the Ghostwriting Guru, and you can find me at thewritingking.com or at ghostwriting.guru. And feel free to watch this video, give it to friends, whatever, because I think that just getting that Casino Sales Master book and reading it is going to help you immensely. The concepts from what I've read in it, the concepts are applicable to everyday life, like you said, and I'm kind of excited that we're exposing other people to it. So again, thank you for appearing, and